We'd like to welcome Joanne, who came today for our webinar. And I'd like to introduce Mary McGlone, who's writing our history of the U.S. Federation. Mary's been a Sister of St. Joseph of Carondelet since 1973, I believe. And she's writing our U.S. history as we speak. And we hope you enjoy this wonderful, exciting webinar. Over to you, Mary.
Well, hello, good afternoon, in whatever time zone we're talking to. The slide here says the Sisters of St. Joseph of Lyon begin the American adventure. And that's because we're starting with Lyon. Right now we're not touching our Lepuy history, the 1650 to, we're going to run quickly through 1807 till 1836. But this is only going to talk right now about those of us who came from Lyon. So, in order for us to get here from Lyon, there were a number of different historical events that came together in one context. And the first I want to mention is the Society for the Propagation of the Faith. This began with a young woman named Pauline Jaricot, who, as you see with the little holy card here, is now a venerable. Pauline was a young girl whose brother was a seminarian, and he wrote her stories about the missions that touched her and got her little entrepreneurial spirit going. She decided that she could set up something sort of like a chain letter, but she did it with people who played cards together. So everybody who played in one of these weekly card games would give a penny each week when they came for their card. Then each one of them was to be a part of another card group, and somebody from that group be a part of another, so that they were collecting money. And for a little while, some of the priests were rather suspicious of Pauline, wondering if she were a heretic or a fraud. But when she started really making money for the church, they decided that it was a very good thing, got together with some lay people and brought her organization in with them and called it the Society for the Propagation of the Faith. They were centered in Lyon, and this is pretty important for our story. Then we have the Countess Rochjacquelin. This is a young picture of her that I had not seen before, but one of our associates had done some research on her and says this is the young countess. The countess was a woman who experienced the French Revolution, and her family really experienced the French Revolution from the side of the nobility. And everything that went on in France after that, she was going through it from the side of those who had money and had position. She was 2 times a widow and childless, but ended up being a very wealthy woman with lots of property. Got to know Mother St. John at least as early as 1812, when she was part of getting the Sisters of St. Joseph over to the area of Chambéry. Anyway, the Countess was on fire with what she had read in the annals of the Society for the Propagation of the Faith, and wanted to send missioners to convert the Indians and the Protestants in America. Then we have Bishop de Burgh. I put his whole name there because I love the Valentine part of it. He was a Sulpician who came to the United States, and the first part of his career, he was the president of Georgetown College, where he knew and entertained George Washington. Later on, he became the founder of St. Mary's College in Emmitsburg. And through that, he had contact with Mother Seton and her children. They were her sons at his school. Eventually, he became named the administrator of the Louisiana Purchase territory. Previously, All of that we see as the Louisiana Purchase, plus Florida and Cuba, had been under Spanish control. And now suddenly the little United States had that, and the tiny church of the United States was suddenly in charge of dealing with that. A lot of this was French speaking territory from New Orleans up to whatever was settled in St. Louis. When de Burgh was named administrator and bishop of Louisiana, he went to Rome and began to recruit missioners for his territory. He had pretty good success with the Vincentians and also recruited the Religious of the Sacred Heart. He was installed as Bishop of Louisiana, which is that segment we see right there in green, on January 5th, 1818. And he chose to be installed in the city of St. Louis rather than the city of New Orleans, really because there was too much ecclesiastical conflict going on in New Orleans. And when he was installed, it says that he was installed in a church that could be described as a kind of miserable barn falling into ruins. A town which had not even a resident pastor was now the home of the bishop and would soon be flooded with missionaries. And so now we go to one of these first missionaries. This is a younger picture of Giuseppe or Joseph Rosati, one of the Vincentians. Rosati was studying in Rome when de Burgh came and was recruiting. So Rosati was came to the United States, started in the frontier area of Kentucky, and eventually de Burgh got Rosati named as his coadjutor. Shortly thereafter, de Burgh went on a trip to Europe, and while in Europe, resigned as Bishop of Louisiana and left Rosati holding the bag. Um, Happily, Rosati was connected with the Society for the Propagation of the Faith in Lyon. There, he chose Charles Schulten as his vicar, um, and um, his Charles Schulten in
When
Lyon,
you go
a
to the
priest.
event page, just hit the video.
Debbie, you're coming through. Uh, Charles Schulten was the nephew of Claude Schulten. Claude Schulten, who was the priest who had brought together the Black Sisters that
You know what
Mother
I
St.
think?
John
I think
Fontbonne
Don has
organized
you blocked.
as Sisters of St. Joseph after the
They're on
Revolution
from
in
Boston.
St. Etienne. It was Rosati who received the communications from the Countess de Rochefoucauld. And it still is a rather curious thing to
Okay.
understand
Good luck.
why Rosati
I got.
saw the need
Thank you
for
very
deaf
much.
education
Okay.
in America. But he wanted deaf education. And so that was part of what he communicated back to the sisters in Lyon. Now, Mother St. John Fontbonne, we're not going to go in deeply to her story, but this is just to remember where she founded, among other places. Saint Etienne, she started with those sisters there in 1808. Lyon, the mother house was completed in 1814. St. Louis, the first missioners came in 1836. And she, who was 30 years old at the time of the French Revolution, died just 7 years after the sisters came to the United States. This is the mother house that Mother St. John had built in Lyon. And there we see in a not very clear picture what is probably novices, a novice, a postulant, and a professed sister. In Lyon, Mother St. John was known to walk daily to the chapel at Fouviers, a shrine of the Blessed Virgin, to pray privately before the morning prayer of the community. This would have been an easy 20 to 30 minute walk for her. Later in years, she brought a sister companion who was told not to talk about where they went. But Mother St. John prayed daily at that uh, shrine. Down below, we see what is today the shrine. On the left, that's the big basilica at Cuvier. On the right is another view of the mother house at Lyon. So this is just giving us the sense that Mother St. John, there's nothing to indicate that she ever had an idea of sending missionaries out of the country. There is nothing to indicate that she herself had any contact with or interest in the Society for the Propagation of the Faith. She's someone that we can say was open to the Holy Spirit's inspiration and stimulated by that Holy Spirit of love. And so when she received the request, primarily from the Countess Rochatelin, she allowed the sisters to volunteer to be missioners in America. And there was a good number, they say, of volunteers from Lyon ready to get on a boat and go to America. It is also from Sister Janet Gagnon, I have learned that when it came time for the council meeting to happen, at which the sister missionaries would be chosen, Mother St. John absented herself so that she would not prejudice the decision. And the first 6 chosen traveled on a boat like that with Father John Fontaine. Here we see the manifest of the boat with their names. You see up at the top, Rev Fontaine. This would have been an English-speaking captain because you see the things are written in English. He's 33 years old. Antoinette Fontaine, 30. Her profession is a nun. And then it goes on down. M.A. Fontaine, Marie Chapillon, Margaret Boutet, Marie Villain, Claudine Devois, etc. It's just fun to see that this is really the original ship's manifest, listing our original sisters. So who were they? Delphine Fontaine, the younger of the 2 Fontaine sisters who came to America. Delphine was 23 at the time of their sailing. In addition to Delphine, of course, came her sister Febroni Fontaine. Now, this picture doesn't look like it was taken when they were very young. Febroni Fontaine and Febroni Chapillon were good friends, and my friend Sister Jane Bellman, the archivist at Carondelet, says that it's very unusual for 2 friends to have their portrait taken together. But Delphine Chapillon, who is there on the left, was 26 years old. Febroni Fontaine was 30. She was almost the oldest. Here is the sister who was the oldest when they took that trip, Félicité Boutet, who added the name Félicité to her religious name in honor of the Countess Rochatelin. Félicité was 32. Our next sister, Sister Saint Protais, obviously this is not a picture taken of her when she was 22 years old. Saint Protais is actually our best chronicler of the early days, and you'll hear more from her about the trip and so on as we go on. The next sister whose picture appears here is Celestine Pomeroy. Celestine had just made vows. She was sent with Sister St. John Fournier to Saint Etienne in 1836 to study teaching of the deaf, and at that time that was learning sign language. Fournier, who I will talk about later, had not yet made vows. Those 2, Celestine and Fournier, came in 1837. The last person here is Sister Philomene. We don't have a picture of Philomene. She wasn't faceless in real life. The point is, we don't know why we don't have a picture of her. Perhaps she was a lay sister. That's one guess. And yet, She held teaching positions for most of her ministry, so I'm not sure that she was a lay sister. It also may be that she made vows so quickly so recently before they took off for America, that she didn't have time to have a portrait taken. It could be that it was around somewhere and got lost sometime in the past 150 years. Those are our first 8 sisters, the only 8 Mother St. John sent to America. When those sisters arrived in New Orleans, they stayed for a while with the Ursulines, who immediately let them know that in America, even in a city as Catholic as New Orleans, they were not going to be able to go out in public dressed as nuns. And so they should disguise themselves in what were real widow's clothes. That's kind of interesting, since our original habit wasn't a habit, but rather the widow's dress of the day, and then they had to hide their habit with widow's dress. But anyway, for uh, until nearly 1900, sisters would have to disguise the habit in order to go out safely on the streets. From being met in New Orleans by Bishop Rosati and Father John Tynan, of whom we will hear later, they went up the river to the Diocese of St. Louis, where what is now called the Old Cathedral was a brand new cathedral. The Diocese of St. Louis had been established as a diocese in 1826. They cut off the Diocese of New Orleans at the edge of the state of Louisiana. So what was north of Louisiana up to wherever the Quebec Diocese stopped, and out to the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. That was the diocese that Rosati had. Now, in the 1836 Catholic Directory, we are told that at the cathedral, the 10 o'clock Mass each Sunday would have the sermon alternating one week in French, another week in Spanish. The 9 o'clock Mass was always preached in German. At that time, there were 16 parishes in the state of Missouri, 9 in Illinois, and 3 in Oklahoma. There are some that were visited, some churches or communities visited occasionally, but not listed in terms of where there would have been a liturgy. The Catholic Directory does not mention how many communities of sisters there were at that time in St. Louis. But as far as we know, when the Sisters of St. Joseph arrived, which was March 25th, 1836, there had been already in the diocese the Religious of the Sacred Heart, who had been recruited by Bishop DeBerg, the Sisters of Charity, and the Sisters of Loretto from Kentucky. The Sisters of Charity coming from Emmitsburg. The first place where our sisters went was Cahokia. That was our first mission in the United States, where the sisters actually stayed for a while. That parish was established in 1699. The current church, which we see here, was built in 1799 to replace one that was destroyed by fire. And shortly after their arrival in St. Louis, where the sisters stayed with the Sisters of Charity, Sisters Fabroni and St. Protes went over and began a school at Cahokia. That school was open and closed off and on for the next 15 years because of flooding on the river. It was too close to the river and the bottomlands. And it was not, they weren't able to maintain the mission there because of all of that water, the sickness that came with it. And Sister St. Protes became ill enough that she was soon sent back to St. Louis to recover. On September 12, 1836, the 3 sisters who had been studying English came over and took over the log cabin at Fond du Uh, Previous to our sisters being there, there were Sisters of Charity who lived there with orphanages. Those sisters left on July 22nd, 1836, for their new orphanage, nicer place. And the sisters came on September 12th, the Sisters of St. Joseph. They came on September 12th, and on September 19th, they opened a school with 20 students. In October, two children whose, two girls whose mother had died were brought to be there as orphans, and 2 weeks later, they got two more. So in this little cabin, they had 24 students, four orphans, and three sisters. Just about a year later, the two who had gone to study French, or to study sign language, arrived from France. They actually thought they had been lost at sea because they had been expected around May and didn't show up until September. But this is what Sister St. John Fournier wrote about their trip. When they arrived, first of all, the bishop wasn't sure he was talking to real sisters of St. Joseph, so he asked them to say something to one another in sign language. They did. One spoke and the other one laughed, and he asked what they had said, and they said it had been too long since they had eaten good French bread. Anyway, as Sister St. John Fournier tells the story, she says, he told us he didn't want us to lose our rosy cheeks. He didn't tell us the real reason why he was keeping us in St. Louis. The poor house, log cabin, was too small. He was having it raised one story and there was no roof. But the weather was good. They brought us some mattresses, which we stretched out on the floor, and we tried to take a little rest in our wet habits. But alas, who could sleep? With rats, mice, and numberless little insects not only as companions, but walking over us all night, and for 10 or 12 nights in succession. The house was finally covered with a roof, and we left our famished companions to feed themselves as best they could. The following week, the bishop brought a little deaf-mute girl. Now interestingly, there were no deaf children to come to the sisters' school in St. Louis. This little deaf girl came from Potosi in Missouri, about 70 miles away, and eventually there were a few more. But those early years had definitely their share of troubles. The rough and tumble people of the Carondelet area. It was not a sophisticated town. The people were woodsmen primarily. For Cahokia, the problem was the river. It kept overflowing and causing disease. Another problem was Father Jacques Ponta. He took his role very seriously as the spiritual superior, the ecclesial superior of the system. And he, together with his sister Delphine, who was named the first superior on the Carondelet side, tended toward rigidity. They didn't get along well with the pastor at Carondelet, who was just right across the way from them. Um, and it was very, very difficult. There was also the sickness, primarily of Sister St. Protes, and everybody shared poverty. But then Mother St. John Fournier writes, a few weeks after our arrival, Mother Delphine received our first costume, Miss Dillon, Sister Mary Frances Joseph. She belonged to one of the richest families in St. Louis, but was happy to share our poverty. She died soon after her profession. So here we have Anna Liza Dillon, Sister Marie Frances Joseph. Uh, she would have been 20 years old when she received the habit, and not long thereafter made vows. She did write Bishop Rosati complaining about the superior, Mother Delphine, saying that she worked her too hard. Uh, And what they say is that in one of the trips visiting the sisters in Cahokia, she got a bad cold and died of consumption. Before she had died, as Mother St. John Fournier mentioned, the convent had been enlarged by the addition of a real second story. Uh, and then in 1840, Mother Celestine built an addition. Now, Mother Celestine, shortly after Celestine arrived, within a little over a year, Delphine resigned as superior and went to Cahokia, and Celestine became the superior at Carondelet. And with the help of the Melanchthon family, she started construction on the first brick building at Carondelet, and that was finished in the spring of 1841. In addition to Anna Liza was the only one who entered during the time of Mother Delphine as superior. You get Elizabeth Marsteller, who became Sister Mary Rose, received the habit in 1842, made vows in 1844, and she died in 1884. Not terribly young. Marie Kincaid, who became Sister Marie Antoinette, who would be one of our missioners to other places, received at the same time, and she died in 1848. The ministries of these first sisters. Cahokia was the first school. At Carondelet, they ended up becoming a school sponsored by the state. I'm not sure you'd exactly say a public school, but they earned $375 a year for that. And that was at a time when you could buy 3 eggs for a penny. So that was pretty good money. They also had the orphanage, and by 1838, they were receiving deaf students with uh, an official state school in 1847. Then in 1845, they opened a school for liberated Negroes, and we'll hear about that from Mother St. John Fournier. The other mission opened that year was St. Vincent de Paul School. Sisters Delphine, Mary Frances Malley, and Martha Bunning went there. That was at that time the only parish school in St. Louis. Now, in regard to the School for Freed Negroes, as it was called, this is Mother St. John Fournier writing. In the year 1843 or 1844, our first mission was opened in St. Louis. The very first mission outside of those two houses was a school for liberated Negroes. Obedience sent me there with two other sisters. We also prepared slaves for the reception of the sacraments, and this displeased the whites very much. After some time, they threatened to have us put out by force. The threats were repeated every day. You can imagine what it was like to live with this. I would also guess that teaching people for the reception of the sacraments may have included some kind of literacy. Finally, says Mother St. John, one morning as I was leaving church, several people called out to me and told me that they were coming that night to put us out of the house. I said nothing to the sisters and was not afraid, so great confidence had I in the Blessed Virgin. I put some miraculous medals on the entrance gate and on the fences. We already had them on all the doors and windows of the house. At 11 o'clock, the sisters woke with a start when they heard a loud noise. Out in the street was a crowd of people crying out and cursing. We recited together the Memorare and other prayers. They were ready and willing to break down the door. They returned 3 times that same night, but our good mother protected us, and they were not able to open the door from the outside nor break it down. We had about 80 children, all good and well behaved. There were about 20 little boys, and they were already making fine progress. I believe we had been there a year and a half or 2 years, I scarcely remember the date, but the dates must all be at Randolph. The day after our adventure, the mayor of St. Louis advised Bishop Kenrick to close that school, and so he did. It was at this time that the superiors of the Sisters of Charity withdrew their sisters from Boys' Asylum. So the bishop asked dear Mother Celestine to send us from 3rd Street to the asylum. There we found 75 little boys covered with vermin. They had had no discipline for 6 months, having only one sister at the asylum who relied, oh, now we're talking, excuse me, at this we're talking about Philadelphia. How did we get to Philadelphia? Why would missionaries from France come to a place like St. Louis, the gateway to the West, and go east to Philadelphia as their first out of the area mission? Well, first of all, let's remember that Peter Richard Kenrick was the Bishop of St. Louis. Uh, he had been bishop from 1841 to, he was bishop before that, archbishop from 1841 to 1896. You see any resemblance there? The Bishop of Philadelphia was Francis Kenrick, his older brother. Bishop of Philadelphia from 1830 to 1851, and then Archbishop of Baltimore from 1851 to 1863. Mother St. John Fournier tells the story, but first we should know a little more about her story. Mother St. John was born in 1814 in France, not very near Lyon. When she decided that she had a religious vocation, she believed that it was necessary to go far away from her family. So she went away to Lyon and entered the community of the Immaculate Conception, a cloistered contemplative community. She made vows April 19th, 1832. Somehow she heard about the Sisters of St. Joseph having a mission to America and felt the call to the missionary life. So she left her community and entered the Sisters of St. Joseph, where she received the habit in June of 1836. Now that would have been around the same time as all of the missionary activity was being done. Actually, she would have been a postulant when the sisters left and received the habit after the first missionaries left. She was sent to Saint Etienne to study deaf education, sponsored by the Countess Rochatelet. By the time she went to America, she was still a novice. She was not able to make vows until December 27th, 1838. She kept requesting vows, but it seems as though the bishop was reluctant to have her make vows. In part, perhaps, because she had some struggles with health. But she was the one who was sent as the superior to found the community in Philadelphia in 1847. So, the founders of Philadelphia, Mother St. John Fournier, about whom we have just heard, Sister Mary Joseph Clark. Uh, she was received into the community in 1845, made vows in 1847, was 22 years old at the time that they went to Philadelphia. Sister uh, Antoinette Kincaid, Mary Elizabeth Kincaid, made vows at the same time. And Sister Magdalene Weber was somewhat older. She was actually originally from Pennsylvania, but not so near Philadelphia, and entered the community at the age of 34, and was sent to Philadelphia at the age of 36. And here is Mother St. John Fournier's description. On the 6th of May, 1847, after repeated requests from the Bishop of Philadelphia, F. Patrick Kenrick of happy memory. Four sisters arrived in Philadelphia to take charge of the orphanage, which for 2 years had been entrusted to ladies and servants who received their salaries and took little care of the orphans, so that we found them covered with vermin and in rags. We had to get to work immediately and with courage, even though we were quite disgusted. There were then only 75 children. Now, when she is writing in the 1880s, we have 400. There were only then two houses of Sisters of Charity and ourselves in Philadelphia. Now there are 11 different orders in the city. In the month of June, after our arrival, they arrived in May. In the month of June, Bishop Kenrick asked me to receive several good subjects. Quite against my will, we received four, who were soon as busy with the children as we. Soon they said everywhere, even the priests, that our postulants were eating the orphans' bread. At first we did not receive any salary. Then we kept our own money separate, which was not very easy. With the postulants' money, we bought all the necessities of life for the postulants. I explained everything to Bishop Kenrick, who told me not to pay any attention to such nonsense. Now that's nice and easy for a bishop to say, but he had already been through all kinds of violence against the Catholics in Philadelphia. So, and Mother St. John Fournier, we recall, had seen her own riots in St. Louis. So, as superior, young superior that she was, I understand, we should understand that she could have been quite concerned. But anyway, here are the stories of their first receptions and ministries. In October 1847, they received Eliza Jane Carroll, who became Sister Jane Frances de Shanta, whose name would be famous. They also received Josephine McMahon, who became Sister Josephine. December of that year, Mary Myrie became Sister Apollonia, Margaret Lovett, Sister Solomon. Their ministries. They started with St. John's Asylum. Asylum was the normal word used around then for an orphanage. The following year, they opened St. Patrick's School, where 3 sisters were sent. Then, in the following year, 1849, they opened St. Joseph's Hospital, which closed in 1859. There were 5 sisters there. That was the first CSSJ hospital in America. In 1850, they opened St. Anne's Widows Asylum. In 1851, St. Joseph's School. In 1854, St. Philip's School. So you see, they were receiving more sisters from Carondelet and also receiving their own novices. And I think at this point, we might stop for now and go on the next webinar with the next foundation, which will be in St. Paul and will again implicate Mother St. John Fournier. So that's it for today. Thank you very much.